Hey there, everybody. R. Felix Finch here, and it's Tuesday Interviews Day. I know I'm a little like 3 minutes behind, but that's okay. I am dealing with a half a world away. Literally, I'm talking 12 time zones away today as I am joined live from, I believe, Beijing, Adrian Gomez of Middle Kingdom Wrestling. China is a almost brand new field for professional wrestling, and I'm here to talk about how this happened and what is in store for the rest of us and the rest of the world. So, Adrian, welcome.
Hi, R. Felix Finch. Happy to be here on Frisco Flame YouTube channel. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, I'm more than happy to have you now. Like I said, middle China not exactly known for its wrestling. When people think of Far East wrestling, they're normally thinking of Japan. So how long has Middle Kingdom wrestling been operating in China?
Yeah, and just to start off, you said that most people think of Japanese wrestling when they think of East Eastern wrestling, Eastern countries, and that's actually one of the motivations behind MKW, Middle Kingdom Wrestling, is we wanted to add more countries such as China to the equation when people think about East Asian wrestling. So MKW, we've been around since 2015, and we started actually quite very small, and through our fan base and through a lot of great people, we've been able to grow to really finally start get mentioned in pro wrestling and international wrestling a lot more. So yeah, we've been around for 5 years now.
5 years, and how long have you yourself been in China?
I've been in China for 10 years myself.
Okay, so what brought you there? Like, where are you originally from, and what brought you here? Like, what is the Adrian Gomez story to start out? Before we even get into Middle Kingdom Wrestling, let's find out about what the hell you're doing half a world away.
Um, I was attracted to China through I was a huge fan of Anthony Bourdain. Fortunately, he has passed. Uh, but through being a huge fan of his television shows, his books, um, and the way he described other cultures and their food culture. Um, as soon as when I was in college, and that's when my fascination with living around the world got really big while I was in college. And as soon as pretty much as soon as I was ready to graduate, I watched an episode of Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations TV show, where he was in Harbin, which is a city in China, the northeast of China, a very far north eastern part of China, right on the Russian border. And I just thought it was such a fascinating place. So as soon as I finished that episode, I actually decided, you know what, I'm just gonna, that's where I want to go, because it just attracted me in such a way. It left a really deep impression on me. So as soon as that was done, I would say about 6 months later, I was living in Harbin, working first as an English teacher. Pretty much accepted the first job I could right out of there, and eventually I found myself still living here 10 years later.
Starting as an English teacher, how much Chinese did you have under? Was it an area that spoke Mandarin or Cantonese? Because Cantonese is mainly just Hong Kong, right?
Uh, yeah, Cantonese would be Hong Kong and Guangdong province, which is right on the which borders with Hong Kong. But actually, the we're in Harbin. It's very, I guess you could say, standard Mandarin. In fact, that is probably the most attractive place to live in for anybody who wants to learn Chinese. Now, you asked if I had known any Chinese before I went there. I actually knew absolutely nothing. But I would say that I would say by now my Chinese is pretty proficient, and you kind of have to be, especially in the work I do and the people that I mostly work with and have to cooperate with. So thankfully, my language, my Mandarin level, is something that I keep working on literally every day, and thankfully, I've gotten it to a pretty comfortable level for
Yeah, yeah, that's got to be really interesting having to learn that from immersion. So you just like decided to move and plopped yourself right in the middle of an unknown country that you had only seen on TV. That takes an outstanding level of
me.
balls.
Oh wow, yeah, I suppose it does.
And it is quite amazing to me. So, what is it you do these days besides Middle Kingdom Wrestling, or is Middle Kingdom Wrestling your full time gig?
As a Middle Kingdom Wrestling has gotten bigger, actually continued to be, uh, for about 5 years, I continued to be an English teacher. And then eventually transitioned into subjects teaching to be like business and humanities subjects and that kind of thing. And eventually got into economics. And actually a lot of through a lot of learning more about about the interests of Chinese people, and I would kind of sometimes do little class surveys on what people feel about like combat sports or even professional wrestling. I always make sure to kind of include that in there. I eventually was able to get kind of a good glimpse into how much wrestling is like penetrated in China. So during those years when I was an English teacher and also doing subjects teaching, I did prepare to transition into hopefully being able to be a full-time wrestling promoter. And I would say the last year and a half to 2 years, this has been my full-time gig. Thankfully, I've been able to be in a position to focus on wrestling, which I think is a dream for a lot of wrestling promoters, a dream for a lot of wrestlers or people in the wrestling business doing other kinds of work. So right now, I am full-time in wrestling.
So that is interesting to me. You said you were able to gauge the penetration of wrestling into the market. How much did the general population know about professional wrestling before you guys started up?
It definitely had penetrated the young audience. So I would say the majority of young people in China, and I'm talking people born in the late 90s and 2000s, I would say they all have a pretty good understanding of professional wrestling. Obviously, thanks to the WWE, which has moved to being able to have an official platform in China on PPTV, which is a network in China. And but besides, I would say after post 30s age, the penetration of the mind share of professional wrestling in China is very small for people after 30 in that age range.
Okay, is it kind of still viewed as children's entertainment there at the moment, or well, how would you say wrestling is positioned in the? Because you said WWE does have a platform, and it might surprise you. I know nothing about Chinese television stations or their demographics, so I don't know how it's positioned. If it's positioned as like a family hour, as children's entertainment, as combat.
That's like an alternative entertainment. Not necessarily like family entertainment, but it's aimed at young men.
Okay.
So it's not viewed as a children's. I wouldn't say it's viewed as like a children's show. And and this is based on the way I've seen it being marketed in China. It seems to be a bit edgy for a Chinese audience.
Okay, and I know that John Cena's getting some work out there. I didn't know if John Cena enjoyed the same level of superstardom in China that he does like here in the States.
I think John Cena. Yes, he is definitely worked hard to build a relationship with the Chinese audience. Unfortunately, I don't think that's working out so much for John Cena being able to like bridge WWE into China. It seems like it's benefiting mostly his movie career. So he's definitely become a huge star in China as far as his movies getting a lot of views and people buying tickets to see those movies. But it seems like when he's promoting, when he's here promoting and speaking Mandarin and living here in the culture, I think a few years ago he lived here for about 4 or 5 months, and it seems to be aimed mostly at promoting his movie career, not necessarily the WWE.
Gotcha. Now, with your last name Gomez, would I be able to correctly assume that you are some form of Latin?
Yeah. I my background is Mexican.
Okay, and so being there in China as like, are you viewed as Mexican American or are you just viewed as an American?
Wow. I mean, most people don't go into too much of my family history. So if I just say I'm from America, usually it stops right there. But sometimes there are Chinese people. There are still people in China who believe that it's impossible for me to be an American because they're just like, that's impossible.
Yeah, because no, I understand. We're dealing with white as the default.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I was just very curious because I know that my white friends go to China. They're clearly seen as an American. My black friends go to China. They're clearly seen as black. I haven't had a lot of my friends in like I did once date a girl whose mother was from China, and the moment she saw me, she recognized I was Filipino and was mad. but
oh wow. Yeah, there's still I would say that race relations and that kind of stuff in China, it's a bit, unfortunately, it's still kind of primitive.
Hey, America's not much. America is not exactly the most progressive at all times, so
sure, and that is something that I if there's a frustrating experience, which I think could happen to anybody living anywhere, and certainly happen sometimes here in China regarding perhaps racism or just an ignorant worldview. I do often think, well, in America, with what I know and my experiences there, and also the way things are right now, I do understand that, this is a world issue. It's not necessarily a China issue or even American issue. It's a world issue.
You've kind of broken into one of the things that brings us to talk to here today, and one of the reasons that so many of us have so much freedom to have these video conferences. Would you kind of describe this, like how everything developed as far as Middle Kingdom Wrestling goes? Because I don't know what your plans were for shows going into this, but we know that the world kind of had to hit its brakes, and China earlier than most for obvious reasons. So kind of what happened with you guys and where you ended up where we are now, or I guess is kind of a holding pattern?
As regarding the coronavirus, for us in China, we closed in mid-January, if I recall, or in mid-January is when we closed. We did have we were promoting a show during that period, And what I mean in the few weeks leading up before the closure, um, I would say we announced the show very early January, which was going to be, it was called the Jinghua Warriors Cup, and we were really excited to promote the first ever women's wrestling tournament in China. It was scheduled for March 14 and 15, I think. It's gonna be a 2 nights, and we already had all the talents and we had announced most of them. In fact, we had Oliva Bates. She was going to be a part of this. She even made a promo for it. We had announced it. It was a very good promo she did. She went out of her way to go to Chinatown to film it, which I thought was pretty creative. I think she was in Los Angeles to film that promo. And we decided to cancel the event or postpone it or indefinitely. I would say in January, like late January, pretty much right after China decided to lock down most of Wuhan city. So I would say we were the first company, unfortunately, to cancel a wrestling event because of COVID-19. I can't think of another company that did it before us. We were right in China, and it was mid-January. And that's when we decided to cancel the event. So we followed the same pattern that America did and other countries did. It's just that it happened about 2 months earlier. So everything that you saw or you have seen while living in America, where things locked down and then events canceled and then so on and so on. We went through that, but in January.
Now it has obviously there are very different just structures politically and culturally in the United States and China. Did China kind of have a more unified approach to it, or did you still have different governments trying to decide what's best for their region opposed to a national good?
Well, based on the political or the government structure of China, I mean, whatever Beijing says, and which is the equivalent of the Washington D.C., whatever Beijing says, that is the way it's going to go. So there isn't necessarily much, I would say, much local say for the provinces. China has a provincial structure similar to Canada, and there's not, but knowing what we know about China, there's not much autonomy in that structure. So basically what Beijing says, it's the way it goes. So even if there were, I guess you could say, pushback from the local people or from local government officials about the extent of the closure or how to deal with the shutdown, it really at the end of the day, it's what Beijing says. So when China closed, it closed, and it closed in a very aggressive way. Meaning, it wasn't a suggestion. It was, this is what you guys have to do, and this is what we're gonna do, and this is how we're gonna get through it. And looking from the outside in, I don't know how people feel about that. Obviously, there is a degree of I guess, infringement on freedom and those kind of things. But at the same time, we are dealing with a virus. So, America still seems to be, unfortunately, struggling with its virus control. Obviously, I think we're going to have to wait really in the future, like a few years in the future, to be able to really analyze which countries had the best approach to it. So I don't want to comment too much on America's the way they deal with the way we. I can say they. I say we. I am an American. Deal with it, but at the same time, I think we're gonna have to wait in the future to really look back.
Yeah, well, like I said, that was one thing I was curious about, because that is the issue we're having here, is the state governments each taking a different approach, or different regions deciding, trying to get together to form a pact, whereas I didn't know what, like, the strength of provincial governments in China, or if it was just the strong federal just the strong federal unit, and from what you're saying, it is just a unilateral federal movement to declare national emergency. So that's good. So have so you said you did it much earlier than us. What's it looking like right now? Like, what is able to be open right now? What are you able to do once again that perhaps had been stopped for a while?
Um, that's a good question. From what I know, I'm hearing more people from around China uh, who are going back to work, or and I'm talking about people, educators, teachers. So that's a really big deal to see people going back to work, especially teachers and students. So I would say so far that's a sign of that things are better. Um, in some things, it's still province to province, city to city, and some places cinemas are open, and some places they aren't. Where I'm at right now in Harbin, unfortunately, we've had a few breakouts post major breakout, so we're still a bit more closed than other places in China, in other areas. But from what I can see, with people gathering, and with some events still on and TV shows returning with audience and that kind of thing, certainly things are better. That is, that's irrefutable that things have not, that things aren't better. They just are. But on a national level, it's still place to place. So in that way, I guess the local governments, the local provincial systems, they still have a little bit more say on how quickly they open back up. But to see schools returning this week, that's kind of a big deal to me. That kind of hit me when I saw that. I'm like, it looks like things are, returning. I don't know, normal. Nothing will ever go back to normal for a while, but that's certainly a return to some form of normality.
Yeah, no, for sure. What is the school year like in China? I don't know if because again, I have the scope of kind of what we do in America, how our year goes. Like, what is the school structure in China? Because a lot of schools here are closed basically until next year. They've basically said, yeah, you're not returning until August at the earliest.
So when you say what's the school structure like? What do you mean?
Like what months of the year? Like in America, for the most part, it's like Labor Day to mid June, early June,
Mhm.
where that's when everybody's are in school.
Hmm. The school structure is
Or like when's school season?
from school season. School season is from late August to early January, and then there's 2 months, about 6-7 weeks of break, and then from March until July, and then there's another 6-7 weeks of break.
Okay, yeah. Like I said, I wasn't sure like what that meant because like if for the most of the states, if you return to school now, they'd be there for like 2 or 3 weeks. So that would be.
That's right. That's right. So I mean, a lot of them at this point, returning at this term, during this term, I guess this is the. I'm sorry, this is the spring term, right? For students,
Yes.
I think that moment, that's long gone at this point.
Yes. So with Milking Rings, like how did you even get started? Before we talk about like kind of because we talked about what of because if clearly if you guys had like Leva Bates ready, you guys had some legitimacy pulled in. If you were able to fly in some signed talent to your country to perform, what was that even like? Like how did you guys build that reputation? What was the first step in getting wrestling into China?
the first step in getting wrestling into China was, for me personally, I had to get to know the people from before me who had tried to get wrestling into China. Now, I would say that MKW and me and my team were the first ones to really legitimize pro wrestling in China, but there have been some really uh, remarkable and admirable attempts at trying to get wrestling started in China. And those people, I had to get to know them. I had to see how they did it. So there were a few Chinese guys who had tried their own wrestling school, tried their own wrestling shows on a much smaller scale than MKW. But I knew that if I wanted to build a team, I had to get some of the people who actually had trained, Chinese people who had trained to be wrestlers. And that's really how it began, and I had to get to know these people. And I made trips to find them. Really, there was a lot of investigations because local wrestling was not big, and I had to. But the more I dug, the more I knew that, you know what, I heard this guy had tried something, or I heard this guy had tried something, and then I went out and tried to build those relationships to be able to. Let them join my team, and I say, let's do this. I have, we can use your skills and my vision to be able to bring wrestling, to try wrestling again in China. And thankfully we've been, like I said, we've been around 5 years now. And I really see that as soon as once we're allowed to come back, we're going to be even bigger than ever.
Now, do you run show to show? Are you basically like a sole owner or promoter, or do you have a crew? Because like right now, I know someone like MLW, they're pay to play basically, so they're not having shows. Their people aren't making money. WWE's made some massive layoffs. Ring of Honor, to their credit, is still paying people for the performances that were scheduled, even though they can't perform. What's kind of been your situation as far as your office, if you have one, goes? I don't know how invested your team is, or if you're just like a one-man operation.
Well, we do have a monthly payroll, and what it's taken to make MKW to become more legitimate is that we have had to have people who work for us full time, whether that be as wrestling trainers or people in marketing or editors who we really have a very busy on the China side, especially uh, um, media team. So, and through all these workers that we have, we really have to make sure that during this situation that, not only are they able to, to get the money that we guaranteed that they would get, that we would have during this time, but we also want to make the point that, once wrestling comes back, they're ready. They're ready to get back into it. And because I think that's a good way to create morale, good morale, so that, which is why we made the decision to an MKW, to everybody who's still associated and as part of our monthly payroll, that is still being honored. So I'm very very proud that we're able to do that, and I hope that this also sets a precedent to people who who really want to make sure their wrestling company is successful post COVID-19. I know not everybody's in the same situation to do what I'm doing in MKW, but at the same time, what I'm hoping is that this is kind of an investment in the team spirit of MKW, so that once we're ready, we can go back to doing what we were what we're setting out to do, and that was create not only the biggest wrestling company in China. We've already we're already the biggest company in China. Uh, that's been easy for us, but also to be a serious contender in the international conversation of good wrestling companies.
Okay, and again, you said like your area is still in lockdown. Do you know if there are goals that have been set for at least events such as wrestling to return? For like, what will it take for Middle Kingdom wrestling to be like, all right, quarantine's over, let's fight?
Hmm. I would say we got it. We must do this in a very cautious way. So when I say that, we have to take small steps to make sure exactly what are the limits of in being able to run an event. Right now, there's no playbook, there's no guidebook on how do you return back to events. Nobody's left uh, a guidebook for us to follow. So we really have to go on based on our own instincts. And excuse me, I would say that one of the first steps we have to take is we have to see what's working. And one of the things that's working is shows with no audience, or shows that are just being broadcasted live, and shows where the talent pool probably is going to be limited to wrestlers who are local. So that is what we're looking at. We're looking at, can we run a show without an audience? Can we run a show where we focus solely on the broadcast of it? And can we run a show where we don't bring in international wrestlers or wrestlers that have to cross any borders, but can we run a show if we fly in wrestlers from all over China? Now, speaking truthfully, I don't want to be responsible for the person who puts people in quarantine. China's a big country, so if we're having people flying from one place to another to reach a wrestling show, and then the first thing they do when they get off the flight is they have to be put in a 14-day quarantine or whatever. That is something we want to avoid. So we have to make sure that we have our eyes open, and we have our ears right to the source of information that's going out there, so we can make the decision on how and when to best run a show under this current circumstances.
Okay, that all makes sense. It's just, it does seem like just a terrible situation to have to be in altogether. But when you are able to open, like, what are some of your big plans coming up? Are you looking to like actually fulfill that women's tournament you were talking about once again, or do you have other tournaments that you had planned? Did you have kind of a path to expansion for MKW?
Well, actually, MKW, and I think one of the things that makes us very special is the fact that we try to run shows not just in China, but we try to run, and China, in my opinion, exemplifies a country where the development of pro wrestling is starting from a point where it was almost non-existent, where the development of wrestling there has had to build up and overcome so much to get to where we are today. And I recognize that also goes on in other countries like Vietnam and Nepal and South Korea and so on. So I've actually have a very strong relationship with the wrestling communities and a lot of other countries where wrestling, you could just say it's small, it's developing. Maybe there's a strong online community of dedicated wrestling fans, and we try to bring wrestling to them. So we have had wrestling shows in Thailand, in Nepal. We work together with teams in Vietnam and South Korea. And thankfully, there's a lot of great people in those countries that I would say, are in a similar position that I am in, where they're pioneers and they're trying their best to get wrestling onto a bigger platform. And thankfully, MKW has been associated with a lot of these companies. And we have actually been able to bring in a huge, diverse roster into MKW shows in China. We even had a 12-country tournament a few years ago. We brought in 12 wrestlers, all from countries, mostly from countries where people hadn't even seen these wrestlers from these countries perform. So I would say we have very big ambitions, and unfortunately, those ambitions do require open borders. Open borders. So, and right now, none of those things can happen in this environment.
Right.
But we're waiting. We're waiting.
No, I can completely understand that, and it absolutely seems like it just seems like a real bad just situation overall, and obviously it's things beyond your control. But going forward, I'm gonna get towards wrapping this up. But what's the end game? What is the end goal of MKW? At what point do you think, you know what, I've done all I can do here, or my mission is accomplished?
I would say the end goal for MKW would be where MKW can finally be broadcast on a national television station in China for the rest of its years. That would be the end goal.
Okay, so are you guys?
We want to be on national TV.
Oh, okay. So right now, are you guys kind of localized as far as that, or are you just online?
We use a lot of online. We use a lot of streaming. I mean, we are on very powerful streaming platforms, and some of our shows get tens of millions of views. However, to be taken as a very serious brand, I think you need national TV in China, because that is certainly where the legitimacy is of your product, but also financially. So that would be the end game there. We want to get on a major station for a long period of time.
All right, awesome. Well, you know what, Adrian? I know it is about 11. It is 11 at night where you are, and I thank you for joining me. Please let everybody know where they can find everything. I was like, you're probably doing better than Shane McMahon. Hey, Dermo. Someone just entered the chat. But, yeah, I'm going to wrap it up. But would you let everybody know where they could find everything Middle Kingdom Wrestling?
Okay, well, thank you so much, R. Felix Lynch, for having me on your show. If you guys want to know more about MKW, you can start with our YouTube channel, which is Middle Kingdom Wrestling. Please subscribe to our channel. It's very important to all of us who are on YouTube platform to have more followers and subscribers. We're also on YouTube, MKW Wrestling. I'm sorry, on Twitter, MKW Wrestling. You can follow us there. We're on Instagram, MKW China. We're also on Facebook, MKW China. And just follow what we're doing. Please watch our older videos that we've had. If you guys want to get a good glimpse into Chinese wrestling, there you go. Right, you have a perfect platform to watch wrestling scene in China through MKW. I also want to say, as a side note, that a lot of AEW, that AEW, last year they partnered with a Chinese wrestling company, and I think some people were disappointed by that because they never got to see any Chinese wrestlers on AEW. So if you feel like you didn't get to see what was I guess promised, then you can check out Chinese wrestling right now through MKW.
All right, well, thank you very much, man. It's been wonderful having you. And guys, yeah, go to all the places he said and check it out. You know what though? Do you also have a store so that during these times, I don't know if your wrestlers have any stores available to them. If you have any kinds of pro wrestling tees or Chinese equivalent of pro wrestling tees, an Alibaba shop perhaps. Is there somewhere that people can help support your performers while they don't have a time to perform?
Well, we do have an online shop, but I think it would be difficult to navigate, unfortunately, for international fans. It's in China. It's a Chinese shop. If you guys insist to buy internationally, and then you could add us on WeChat, which is a Chinese application. It's called WeChat. If you make an account, you can add MK Wrestling, MK Wrestling on WeChat, and there you can inquire about buying MKW merch.
All right, yeah, it's like it's always weird internationally, especially shipping. Granted, I deal with China almost every few days because I handle some people's merch orders. It's really fun, especially when it comes to shipping. Shipping is so exciting.
Mm. Yeah, that part always is.
It's like, oh, you've got a great deal. I'm sorry, you want how? It's like that is more than I paid for this object. It's like, yes, it is.
That's right. The shipping cost will usually out price the product that you want.
Buy in bulk.
If you're shipping internationally, but in China, it's usually okay. But
Yeah, but
most people aren't in China.
yeah. Well, actually, I think most people are in China, just not your audience. Not my
Oh
audience.
yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, I thank you very much, man. Again, it's been wonderful having you. And peace out, party peoples. I'll see you next time. Next week on Tuesday Interviews Day, I will have Ksenia from Ksenia Did That on YouTube, Russia's only wrestling YouTuber. So, yeah, I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you.